Retro Now.
Hello there. This is James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and whenever I'm in this part of the galaxy, I listen to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Makes flying a little more tolerable. Don't tell Anakin.
Hello there, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Ness Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we are wrapping up another week with a look at some recent Star Wars news. But before we get into that, Jay, I want to remind everybody where we can be found on social media.
Yes, indeed. And happy Friday. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
Okay, the dish is aligned, the signal's boosted to maximum output, the shield is down, we are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So we'll see exactly how much we get into here, because there was a not the biggest bag of Star Wars news when I started looking into this today. And a little bit more came out from the time I started putting notes together till now. But anyway, some interesting stuff. First up, so there's been this ongoing discussion, Jay, about whether or not this the movie Mandalorian and Grogu was just season 4 of The Mandalorian rewritten as a movie, or they just took the episodes and turned it into a movie or whatever. And it sounds like from this interview that Jon Favreau recently did with SFX magazine through Games Radar, maybe suggests that the truth is maybe more a little bit in the middle. And anyways, I'm going to read the quotes and then we can discuss a little bit. First off, he says, "You can't just take those scripts and turn them into a movie. There were a lot of characters. It assumed you'd watch the whole show, and it was teeing up what was happening moving into the second season of Ahsoka. It was about Grand Admiral Thrawn and following the larger storyline of this era of the Star Wars timeline." So, before we get into some of the quotes from other members that were going to be in season 4, I was very intrigued by that this was going to be more about Grand Admiral Thrawn and setting up, queuing up season 2. What did you think about that?
Well, we've talked very much about the whole Mandoverse kind of crossover thing. And I think that this is kind of, wondering, could this be the confirmation of that this is what was going to happen in season 4? And it kind of sounds like, well, yeah, maybe that's the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we all know that Dave Filoni was at some point supposed to be making a capstone movie, for lack of a better description, that kind of brought together the characters of the Mandoverse for potentially some sort of showdown with Thrawn. And, we've all been calling it Heir to the Empire, based off the Timothy Zahn's book. But I guess just what surprises me the most about that is simply this. At the end of season 3 of The Mandalorian, he talks to Carson Teva about running jobs for the Republic, hunting down Imperials and things like that, which is what the movie ended up being. And I would have assumed that would have been at least part of what season 4 was. But that being said, Thrawn was mentioned in season 2 of The Mandalorian, but they really steered clear of that entirely during season 3 of The Mandalorian. Mm-hmm. So I guess maybe I would have expected more to do with, maybe Bo-Katan and the Armorer and the other Mandalorians type of things. And who's to say that they wouldn't have been in season 4? But this comment, taking it in isolation and on face value makes it sound like no. This is more of the honing things down towards a resolution with Thrawn. And I mean, great. And I think I would have enjoyed that, but still just not quite the focus I was expecting.
Right. No, I totally understand.
Yeah. Okay. So springboarding off of that, Johnny Coyne, who played Lord Janu Coyne in The Mandalorian and Grogu, also had some things to say with Games Radar Plus. And he was saying that there was a time when I was booked to do a whole load of other episodes in season 4. And then that show went away. and then there was an actor strike, and there was COVID, and all sorts of things going on, and it was a difficult time. So this is one of the comments that makes me that makes you wonder, okay, he was supposed to be in season 4 of The Mandalorian, and here he shows up in The Mandalorian and Grogu. Now, nothing's been said about Rhoda the Hutt, and he was going to get several episodes in season 4. And if he had several episodes in season 4, that would have been more screen time than he got in The Mandalorian and Grogu. But it does sound like, okay, sure, you didn't just turn season 4 of The Mandalorian into The Mandalorian and Grogu, but you did lift your ideas from that season and use some of them in the movie.
Totally. Yeah, and that's the thing about the whole argument between could this have been season 4? Should it have been season 4 instead of a movie? Or, was it completely rewritten? And so I feel like a lot of what we saw in the movie was pared down quite a bit, obviously, because it needed to be more accessible to the general audiences to allow people to understand what was going on, because you can't put all of these different things, like the first quote that you just said, there were a lot of characters. It assumed that you'd watch the show. They couldn't do that in the movie.
Right.
So, and that's the thing that kind of makes me a little sad about the fact that we didn't get a season 4, is because we've spent so much time with these other characters leading up to this kind of storyline. And this could have been so much of a bigger like Shadow Council storyline,
Right.
between Janu and Barrow. They might have been central pieces of the Imperial Remnant under Thrawn, and so and then we didn't get that. And that is kind of a bummer.
And I'll pick up on some of that stuff here, but I want to get into the next actor that was talked to, which is Himki Madera, who played Warlord Barrow, who we saw at the beginning of The Mandalorian and Grogu. And he says when they said there wasn't going to be a season 4 for The Mandalorian, but there was going to be a film, with all honesty, I was not expecting that I was going to be part of the film, because there are bigger names and bigger characters that they could bring. And then he said, and Jon said from the get-go when I booked for the show that a season 4 episode would be mine. So I guess that episode became part of the film. So, okay, take some of that with a grain of salt, because we don't know that he ever saw a script for the season he's talking about. But he's just assuming that whatever his episode would have been inspired that first 15 minutes of the movie, which is fair to say. I don't want to keep harping on this, because we've talked about it over a bunch of episodes now, and especially when we did our review, that first 2 parts of The Mandalorian and Grogu. We're talking about The Mandalorian and Grogu again in a couple episodes from now. But the more I hear these things, I kind of wish we just did get the season 4 of The Mandalorian here. And don't get me wrong, I enjoyed The Mandalorian and Grogu, and I'm looking forward to watching it again when it comes out on Disney Plus. But it just seems like, there was depth sacrificed for the sake of telling a tidy movie.
Yes.
That we could have gotten more detail over the course of a season 4. And and I'm not going to quibble with Jon Favreau when he says we just didn't take those scripts and turn them into a movie. I believed him when he says they wrote a new script. You had to. You couldn't. But at the same time, it's just if your season 4 scripts inspired the movie, I think I just would have assumed seen season 4 of all this. I think that's where I come down on that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And that's what I was saying earlier about the fact that they did have to, as you pointed out, they did have to pare it down to fit into a 2-hour movie. And knowing that Jon Favreau said he had all of the scripts written for season 4. So, they had to lift some of the stuff from it. And that's what I was saying about, we've sacrificed 3 different seasons and years of storytelling setup to have this movie. And it's just, I think it leaves a lot on the table. I really do.
Right. What this tells me is if we ever do get a season 4 of The Mandalorian, it's going to be something that's created anew, because the basis for it went into the movie. So,
yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, moving on, Ian McDiarmid was at SpaceCon 2026 with a bunch of other Star Wars celebrities. And during a panel, he was talking about the Emperor. And at one point he said, yeah, the Emperor's dead. But then later he said, I don't believe he's dead. um, okay. I don't even know what the question is I want to ask you about this, but I'm kind of like, one, is that just him reacting to if the Emperor survived being thrown down a shaft in the Death Star and come back to life later in the form of a clone, then he could figure some way out of being defeated and destroyed on Exegol? Or two, and I don't think this is the case, does he have something or something been said to him by someone at Lucasfilm that leads him to believe that this character is not dead? I'm leaning towards number one, but what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, for Ian McDiarmid to say this, I mean, that is the most Palpatine thing ever. You know what I mean? Because it's almost become a Star Wars punchline in a way. I hate to say, somehow Palpatine returned.
It's a
So I'm
meme.
wondering if yeah, oh yeah. So I'm
Mhm.
wondering if it was just mostly said almost tongue in cheek kind of
Yeah.
thing. But I mean, could it be not necessarily rehashed through the timeline, but just maybe exploring different stories through different types of media? You know what I mean? So it could be maybe new stories in comics or different, not reanimating the
Well,
Emperor
okay.
once
I
again.
I wouldn't mind that. If you're going to tell us new Palpatine stories from earlier in the timeline,
Right.
pre
That's what I
the Rise of
mean.
Skywalker, fine. But given the context from what I read that happened in this panel, that's not what he was talking about in this.
Yeah.
And frankly, I hope he's dead. And look, Palpatine is a great villain, one of the best in
Oh,
cinema as far as
sure.
I'm concerned. But surviving being destroyed once is enough. And yes, I can believe that he set up a base in Exegol, a system that the entire galaxy was unaware of, and his Sith acolytes were there, and they were exploring the secrets of immortality and cloning, and what it would take for him to transfer his essence to a clone, and all that stuff. I love that. We can argue about whether or not they actually executed that well. A lot of people are going to tell you no, but I like what the books and the comics and stuff have had to say around that story better than what the movie pulled off. But for him to have a backup to the backup, where are all these other Sith acolytes coming from that he's going to do
Right.
this? Is there
Mhm.
another Sith fleet buried in a planet somewhere? Or uh, let's not go back to that. Well, let's move the story forward. If you want to come up with new Sith, fantastic. If you want to come up with new dark side users, great. Let's do that because I think Star Wars is frequently the best when you've got Jedi or light side Force users against dark side users, and we get lightsabers and all that type of stuff.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
always. I mean, Andor did great without it, but the point being is that let's move beyond that. Let's get into the new stuff. So that's my
Oh,
feeling.
yeah. No, well said. And,
Yeah.
and again, I think you also risk the collective eye roll of the entire fandom. You know what I mean? Like, oh gosh, here we
Mhm.
go again. Like what are
Somehow
they doing?
Palpatine came back again.
Again.
Yeah.
Right.
Who's going to sell
I
us that
just
one?
yeah, I just take it with a grain of salt, almost like Tim Morrison
Mhm.
running his mouth recently, at one of the other cons. And I say that lovingly too. So Tim, if you're listening, we love hearing you run your mouth. Just saying.
Indeed. All right. Well, up next, and this is not anything groundbreaking, but it's just kind of interesting, and so I included it here. But apparently, George Lucas is still making money off Star Wars, and that is because he still owns Skywalker Ranch. And this was revealed by Matthew Wood at SpaceCon 2026. Like I said, they had a bunch of Star Wars luminaries there, and he was talking about how Skywalker Ranch is located about 40 miles north of San Francisco. It's out in nature right before you get to wine country up there. And he, being George Lucas, made this wonderful place work, wonderful place to create art. And he's donated 90% of the land that he purchased to an open space moratorium. It's open space that can never be developed on. And he continues, and now, funnily enough, since the intellectual property of Star Wars is owned by Disney, I work for Disney now, but we work at Skywalker Ranch and we pay George Lucas. He's our landlord because all the rents and the physical properties are his, and he loves having us there. He's a filmmaker at heart, so having us work at his location, I think, feels good to him. This is a feel good story as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it
I
is.
love the fact that he is still clinging to some portion of Lucasfilm through this arrangement. And not that he's making the movies and not that he is there supervising people, but still some part of George Lucas is still attached to what happens with Lucasfilm and Star Wars.
Heck yeah. And and I just love it. He's almost getting like, the royalties as you
Hmm.
mentioned. He's like the landlord for all of this. I mean, truly he's created an ecosystem
Hmm.
of not just for Star Wars, but for filmmaking in general. I mean, you've got between the ranch, Skywalker Sound, ILM, all of the things. So I just think it's so awesome. He's still able to shape filmmaking decades later, and like Matthew Wood said, I mean, he put it so perfectly. So, and it's something that should be, I feel like I just want to say as it should, like they should
Yeah.
be paying him for this because thank the maker. And that's what George Lucas is.
Indeed. Um, so yeah, I just found this fun, and I think that I
Yeah.
would love to have been in the room when Matthew Wood told that story, and I
Yes.
like to hear
That's
from other people
awesome.
about that as well. Okay, so that's it for the news stories that we have, but we still have plenty of time in this episode. So with Father's Day being this Sunday, happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. I'm happy to be a father. I have a great father of my own. Happy Father's Day to him. Happy Father's Day to Craig. I hope you all have a
Thank
fun day
you.
on Sunday.
Mhm.
And
My
happy birthday.
son is now a father as
Oh
well.
yeah,
So
good point.
yeah,
Yeah, a lot of
his
Father's Day
first
celebration
Father's
coming up.
Day. Yeah.
Right. So, but with that having been said, we haven't done this on the show before. I thought it would be fun to maybe pick out some of the best Star Wars fathers and father figures that are out there. And to that end, I racked my brain for a little while this morning and came up with a list of a bunch of Star Wars fathers I could think of. And I don't think this is an all comprehensive list, but wow, there's some good
Yeah.
ones and there's a lot of lousy ones in Star Wars. Um, so I don't know if we necessarily rank these, but I want to talk about some of them here. Up first, Han Solo, Ben Solo's dad. And I don't know that we have a lot of information, Jay, but I don't know that I can necessarily chalk him up as a great father in that regard. But then it occurred to me later, in the brief time he knew Rey, he was a pretty good father figure to her.
It's true. And I think and the way it's funny because the way that I did this after I looked at all these in the notes is that I ranked them in tiers. So I have like my S tier dads and my A tier dads. So Han actually ended up in the C tier for me, and
Okay.
it's because of exactly what you said. He was, in hindsight he became a great father figure I think for Rey, but it was after he maybe learned from some of his misgivings and mistakes and that type of thing with Ben, because he's a wonderful father in theory, right? But he, especially with Ben, his story is one of like absence and disconnect because he wasn't around, he wasn't there. But a lot of that too is attributed to the fact that Ben did go off to Luke's academy. So
Right.
very much like a Jedi Padawan would go to the temple and not see their parents. And I'm not trying to excuse Han for that, but I just don't think that there was a solid foundation for a relationship that was built for them. And to that end, it is kind of sad that the
Yeah.
two of them never had that relationship.
Right. Right. Given the amount of time, I don't want to have this much conversation on all of these, but
Sure.
but yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And a big part of the problem with Ben is that he fell to the dark side, and that was through Snoke's influence. But anyways,
Right.
but you did bring up something. I didn't put Luke on this list, and it's not so prevalent with Ben in the movies because we only get to see like one scene where Luke senses the dark side in Ben, but we get a bit more of Luke with Ben in the comics, and
Hmm.
then also Luke with Rey in The Last Jedi.
Hmm.
So, what tier would you put him in?
Oh gosh. I think I would still put him in the C tier just
Yeah.
because the fact that he's maybe even C minus, because he's very quick to, obviously with Ben, he was very quick to judge, he was
Sure.
very quick to jump to conclusions. And with Ray, he basically rejected her at first. And that's just not how you treat your kids. You know what I mean? So yes, in the end, he was able to say we are what they grow beyond, kind of taking Yoda's wisdom sort of thing, but I don't think that he was in the canon was not as good of a father as he was in Legends
That's
to
true.
his own son, Ben,
Yeah.
ironically.
I think both he and Han get a few points simply because they made sacrifices for these people.
Mhm. Mhm.
Han died trying to redeem Ben, and Luke died trying to protect Rey and the Resistance in that part. But
Sure.
moving on, Anakin Skywalker, and it's impossible to separate him from Darth Vader. And I don't know how you put him anywhere higher than D. I mean,
Right?
because look, he tortured Leia. No, he didn't know it was his daughter. Blew up her planet. Also chopped off Luke's hand. But in the end, he sacrificed himself to save Luke. So if it hadn't been for that, I think he falls squarely in the F tier.
Right.
But I think the other thing we have to consider is that he was also a father figure to Ahsoka. And
Mhm.
I don't know if that I'd put him in the S tier for that, but maybe the A. But what is your thinking?
Yeah, I definitely give him probably a B plus for, his Ahsoka
Mm-hmm.
parentage, if as it were, because there's especially revisiting the Clone Wars in our rewatch, I see so many things that Anakin has done such a great job with as a mentor to Ahsoka.
Uh-huh.
And he's become a better master because of his quote unquote daughter. And that's exactly what happens to real parents. We become better people because we are parenting our children, but we're also learning at the same time in real time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that is a great way to look at that with Anakin.
All right. Up next on the list is perhaps the best father in all of Star Wars, and that's Bail Organa.
Oh, yeah.
The adoptive father to Leia in this, and some great scenes with Bail and Leia and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and those are the ones that I immediately thought of there. And so, I mean, for me, he goes in the S tier. But what do you think?
Oh, for sure. Oh, yeah, he was actually my number 1 in the S tier
Yeah.
by far because, I mean, obviously, he raised Leia as his own. He gives her his values, and that comes through in the person that Leia is. He's compassionate, he's empathetic, he's a great leader, he's a great role model. He never asks for credit, kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing, and obviously Leia became one of the greatest heroes ever. So, I
Sure.
mean, his legacy lived on through her and showed just how amazing of a father he was.
Okay.
And a great husband too, just from
Yeah.
reading the books and comics. So, yeah.
Right. Next on the Luke list is Owen Lars, and of course that's Uncle Owen to Luke. And I struggle thinking about this one. And
Yeah.
on one hand, he holds Luke back, and he's really the first father figure we're introduced to in A New Hope. And
True.
he's the one that's telling Luke that no, you can't go follow your dreams. But then we come to learn it's out of a sense of protection, that he doesn't want what happened to Anakin to happen to Luke, and he knows everything about Anakin there. And so he's grumpy and whatever. But then, he ultimately dies protecting Luke in this regard. And then we get to see him a little bit more in Attack of the Clones, where he's not a father figure at all. We get to see him receive Luke with Beru at the end of Revenge of the Sith. But it's Obi-Wan Kenobi where we really see how far he's going out of his way to protect Luke. And so I'm putting him in the B tier, I think. But what do you think?
Oh yeah, and I agree. And I kind of struggled with Owen as well. I think
Mhm.
I appreciate him more the older that I get because as a parent ourselves, we do want to protect our children. And he knew exactly how dangerous Luke's lineage and heritage was, right? So he gets painted as the bad guy, like you said, holding Luke back, all of these things. But I mean, you have to think about it from the fact that he basically inherited Luke and had him for 19 years and did his best to try to give Luke the life that he needed to have, maybe not
Yeah.
the life that Luke wanted to have, but in the end, he was just afraid. And rightfully so, because I mean, if you think about what he was trying to protect Luke from, it's scary. It's a
Yeah.
scary thing. And there's so many unknowns and there's so much out there that could go wrong and that's why he was trying to be so protective and hard on Luke too. So yeah, so I give Owen a lot more credit, I think now, like I said, as I get older than I ever did. So I put him in a B plus actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next one on the list is Klieglarks, and frankly, I don't think there's enough screen time to warrant a lot of discussion on him.
Yeah,
But
not really.
I mean, obviously Owen's father, and then he's very affectionate in the brief time we see with him with Anakin. Tries to console him, tries to be comforting, whatever. So by default, I'm giving him a B because I think we need to know more before we can go beyond anything beyond that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, good intentions, just limited impact, like you
Right.
said.
Okay, Obi-Wan Kenobi as a father figure to both Anakin and Luke. Um, I'm going to give him an A minus, and here's why. I think he did about as good a job as anyone could, but he was so attached to the Jedi ideals. I think that by itself prevented him from going into the S tier, and also the withholding of the information, even though it was with the best intentions for Luke, I think created unnecessary turmoil for Luke later in that situation. And again, we don't have a ton of time to discuss him, but what are your thoughts on Obi-Wan?
Yeah, I'm like A minus B plus for
Mhm.
Obi-Wan for sure because obviously he was very limited by the structure of the Jedi Order and what kinds of things he could do. I
Mhm.
definitely think once again he had the best of intentions and he did do a great job overall. I mean, he was kind of a mixed mentor father figure, older brother kind of thing obviously to Anakin, and then for Luke he was a protector from afar. So it's kind of hard to you know, kind of put him in the relationship with Luke until he gets a little bit older, but
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Qui-Gon Jinn as a father figure towards Anakin. And I guess you could say Obi-Wan, but I think we were seeing too much at the end of his relationship with Obi-Wan. And we've seen other hints of it in other media and stuff like that. But Qui-Gon Jinn, I am simply going to give him, again, like Obi-Wan, an A minus. I think he was actually doing a better job than Obi-Wan was with Anakin. But again, it was a limited scope. I don't think there was enough to warrant putting him in that S tier or high on the A scale. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually think I'd put him just a little bit lower just because I feel like Qui-Gon, as much as he's a great mentor, he looked at Anakin as I don't want to necessarily say a tool because that's not fair, but he looked at him like, ooh, this is something that is necessary to happen. And so he became his mentor out of a need to fulfill his idea of what was the chosen one. So I think he was looking to that and almost giving Anakin, once again, a role to fill before he was even really able to embrace that. And I don't think that's quite fair of him as a father figure to expect so much of him. So
Okay.
there you go.
Next on the list, Jabba the Hutt. F.
F. Failure.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, your own son rejects your legacy. So, I mean,
Yeah,
that
I mean,
goes without saying.
kudos to you to hiring bounty hunters to try and go get them and all, but yeah, after that, everything else is an F. That's not enough to redeem you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Rada was
Uh,
a spawn, not much of anything else.
Number 10 on the list, Din Djarin as a father figure to Grogu. I'm going to go with a straight up A on this one. I think this is a role he's grown into. It's something that he's reluctant to take on at first, but he never shirked from the responsibility once he told it was his. And he's continued to grow and has striven to grow in that role over time. And does he do it perfect? No, but his heart, I think, is always in the right place.
No, I totally agree. A tier. He definitely chooses Grogu over his own personal gain, quite often. Obviously, he's done that over and over and over again. And it's kind of fun because we've watched him learn how to be a real dad or
Mhm.
a dad in real time over the course of the seasons of The Mandalorian and then in the Mando and Grogu movie and that type of thing. But he still has a little bit of a ways to go by telling Grogu things like heal,
Yeah,
stay, kind of thing. So he's definitely not in that S tier, but I'd give him an A.
right. Um, we can talk about these next two at the same time, but Galen Urso and Saw Gerrera as father figures towards Jin. I'm putting them both in the C tier, and simply for this, um, liked what I saw of Galen and his relationship to Jen at the beginning of Rogue One, but the I don't want to spend a whole time on this, but I don't think he left a good enough plan for taking care of her in the face of the Empire potentially coming up after them. Similarly, Saw Gerrera, I think, had the best of intentions when he came and rescued Jen, but then he abandoned her when she was 16. And while I get why he did it, also, I don't think adequately prepared her or came up with the best plan for dealing with her. So great intentions, poor execution. They both get a C from me.
Okay. Well, I actually put Galen in the B tier because I
Mhm.
do think he was a wonderful father, especially in the formative years for Jen when she was growing up. I mean, you could just tell he loved her unconditionally. I mean, he named her Stardust. She was his whole world. And so, under that particular situation that he got into, it became terrible circumstances, but you always know how much he loved Jen. And I still tear up every time I watch that holo message that he sends to Jen and explains the reasons that he did what he did. So he made mistakes, but he never stopped trying to protect her. So I give him the benefit of the doubt and I give him the B. Saw, I give him the D because he's protective, but he's very emotionally damaging. Like you said, he abandoned her at the age of 16. He was preparing her for survival, not for any kind of relationship. So I think that Saw did what he needed to do, but he was a protector and he was a mentor, but he wasn't a father. So he gets a D.
Okay. Next on the list, Django Fett, and I'm struggling with this one. And the reason being is that I believe I believe was very devoted to Boba. That's what he wanted more than anything with his contract with the Kaminoans when he became to be, the donor for the DNA and stuff like that. He wanted an unaltered clone so he could raise someone and raise them right and try and make the best out of them and everything like that. I question that motive a little bit, though. It's like having a child just so that you can turn them like into the ultimate weapon. But yeah, and we saw how much that mattered to Boba when Django died. So I'm going to go with a B minus simply because I'm having problems reconciling these things.
Hmm. And I think that's fair and I gave him a B actually
Mhm.
because that relationship is so complicated. I mean,
Mhm.
you look at the way that Django, his whole family legacy and the way that he was brought up. So, you talk about like the apple not falling far from the tree, but yet we know how family oriented Mandalorians are in general. So if you want to pull from legends, that type of thing. But, obviously, like you said, he clearly loved Boba and he did raise him in the best way that he could. And he taught him well and he tried to pass on everything that he knew. And as you said, Boba was really upset when he passed, but he did it in such a violent lifestyle that you can't really, condone that kind of thing. So
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Palpatine as a father figure to Anakin, that's another F.
Oh yeah.
Because it was all under Sheena manipulating him. Moving on.
Yes.
Kanan Jarrus as a father figure to Ezra Bridger and Sabine. He was Ezra's Jedi Master. He worked with Sabine with dealing with the Darksaber and those type of things, amongst other accomplishments. I think he cared for both of them deeply. He sacrificed this entire crew at the end of Rebels. And, he struggled with it, but he always worked at it and he never gave up on it. So I am putting
Mhm.
him, I think he's a notch still below Bail Organa. So I'm going to give him into the A tier.
Okay. I would still put him in the S tier, but maybe S minus.
Okay.
So he's definitely below Bale, but he is one of the greatest space dads. We talk about Hera being the space mom.
Mhm.
And because Kanan, he takes what it means to be a Jedi mentor and master, and he puts it into a humanistic perspective with compassion and love, guidance, sacrifice, all of the things. And again, he gave both Ezra and Sabine, I think, what they needed, not necessarily what they wanted. And that takes a lot to be able to do that and to be able to draw that line and to know what your child needs and what truly is going to make them grow as an individual and not just what they want.
Okay. Moving on. Hunter as a father figure to Omega. I am putting him in the A minus figure. I think he did overall a great job with her. I love their parting scene at the end of the Bad Batch, and he says, like, which you're our kid, whatever. And he's counseling her. trying to make sure that this is like she's making the right decision. I love that bit and stuff like that. But it was, and I think it's the A- because this is just not what he was created for when it came
Right.
down to. And
Mhm.
so he has, I think maybe if we'd seen what happened in the interim of season 3 between when they finally, what was the name of that planet, Pabu?
Mhm.
When they
Mhm.
settled there and she decided to leave and go join the rebellion, that he could have been in that S tier, but we didn't really get to see that. They were always on the run. They were reluctantly training her, but then they trained her, and she was constantly, not constantly, but she got captured by the Empire, and they had to get her back. Anyways, he had the potential to be S, but I think with what he was dealing with at the time, he fits a little nicely into that A- for me.
Mhm. No, I think you said it perfectly, and honestly, watching him become a father to Omega was one of my favorite things about the arc in Bad Batch, watching that from season 1 all the way up through the very last episode where we get that flash forward kind of thing, and you do wish that you got some of those fill in the blank kind of moments throughout the years, but like you said, he wasn't originally designed for that, but he adapted to it so well, and just that again, very similar to Din Djarin, and watching him evolve into that role was just beautiful. So yeah, I'm with you.
Next on the list is Cut LaQuain. That was the clone that defected from the Grand Army of the Republic, married a Twi'lek, and essentially adopted her children, Jack and Shea. Um, we got to see him in one episode of the Clone Wars and then a little bit in the Bad Batch. And it's a very small sample size, but he put his family ahead of absolutely everything. And
Mhm.
so I'm putting him in the S tier, but I'm still ranking him behind Bale. Just because he's not as consequential a figure, I guess is what it comes down to.
Uh-huh.
But at any rate, I think he appeared to be an outstanding father.
Oh yeah, I put him like A plus, not quite
Mhm.
S, because like you said, we really haven't seen him as much of him as we have with the other examples of Kanan and
Mhm.
Bale. But I mean, arguably, he provides one of the healthiest homes we see in
Yeah.
Star Wars. You know what I mean? Just from the way that he has provided the love and the guidance and the acceptance and just everything, and just his quiet heroism that he displays by walking away from the war and building a family and choosing family, and and like you said, he always puts his family first, and he's always choosing his family and always trying to do what's best for them, and sacrifice whatever he needs to in order to do that. So yeah, I've always loved Cut. Always one of my favorites. Yes, as a clone defector, whatever you want to call him. So yeah, there you
All right, we got 2 left, and up next on the list is Baron Papanoida. And
go.
of course, this was a cameo appearance from George Lucas in Revenge of the Sith, and then he got an entire episode where some of his children got abducted. And he is a Pantoran, blue skinned, just in case you're having a hard time remembering who he is. Um, Again, very, very, very small sample size, but he appears to have trained and prepared his children exceptionally well. And then he really threw down to get his daughters back after they had been kidnapped.
Mhm.
And, it was kind of a like, while he was rescuing them, they were freeing themselves type of a thing. And so I've struggled with this a little bit. But again, if it was a larger sample size and we had more of this, maybe I'd just give him a straight up A. But I'm going with the A minus, just again, based on the sample size.
Mhm. No, I totally agree with you because from what we get to see of him in the Clone Wars, like you said, it's obvious that he has given his kids the tools that they need to be able to be overall good functioning human beings, very resourceful, very smart, but also very compassionate, and just overall just good beings. So yeah, I'm with you.
All right. This last one's going to be fun. And we could probably think of more, but we're just about out of time. So I'm going to end it with this one. Perrin Firtha. So this is Mon Mothma's husband and father to Leda Mothma. Okay.
Mhm.
So I am trying not to hold against him that he's a lousy husband. Um, you know, but he really indulges his daughter, perhaps to the point that he's spoiling her because, Leda throws at Mon Mothma's face that, Perrin, her dad, would let her get away with whatever she wanted. And so and again, it really the interaction we see between him and Leda is way less than what we see between Mon and Leda, and so I'm not sure what is exactly fair, but I also kind of feel like he's also partially responsible for the bad relationship Leda has with Mon. Mon doesn't get off scot-free in that regard. So at
Sure.
any rate, struggling with this one, I'm going to go with C minus. Because I don't think he's like the worst, terrible, damaging father, but I don't know that he did her any favors with the way he spoiled her. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you're a little more generous than I was. I gave him a D. I
Mhm.
just think parent is the dad who forgot about parent-teacher conferences. You know what I mean? Like he
Mhm.
just he strikes me as that sort of absent father until he needs to use Leda to make Mon mad, kind of thing. So I don't think I think that he uses Leda to get at Mon. Does he love his daughter? I'm sure he does. You know what I mean? But I think that she's more of a convenience slash inconvenience for him than anything else. And I just really felt that in Andor. And yeah, so he gets the D for me. Blech.
All right. All right. So yeah, like I said, I'm sure there's
It was
others we can think
fun.
of, but yeah, we've gone a little bit longer than I intended to on this. But yeah, that was fun. That was fun. It
It was
was like
super
I said,
fun.
it's like, it's one of those things when you initially think about Star Wars and fathers, like, yeah, yikes. But then you do find some good ones out there, and you find guys that
Uh-huh.
are doing their best, which is sometimes all we can do.
For sure. For sure. And
But
happy
with that,
Father's Day, Dennis. I hope you have an
thank
amazing
you.
one.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I am looking forward to celebrating with my family this weekend. But happy Father's Day again to all of our father listeners out there and everyone else. I hope you have a good day celebrating with your dads. Give them a call, tell them you love them, and if nothing else. So, with that, thank you all for joining us for the episode of Podcast Stars and this discussion of Star Wars news and Star Wars fathers. We hope you've enjoyed it. And if you want to make sure you get all of our news episodes in the future, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your podcatcher of choice. We're available pretty much everywhere. We appreciate your ratings, reviews, comments. I've been actually doing a bit better keeping up with those. I just left a whole bunch of responses on Spotify to some listeners today. That was fun. And if I am not getting back to you, email us, and Jay's going to give you that email address and let me know where it is that you are leaving comments so that I can go find them because we love interacting with our listeners. I'd also like to remind you that you can find all of our shows over on retrozap.com. The entire catalog is there, as well as the other great shows that are currently on the network. Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody where we can be found on social media?
Absolutely. So super easy to find us. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. And you can always check out all of our Pinterest boards. And, as Dennis was mentioning, there's all kinds of ways to listen to us. So that includes places like YouTube and YouTube Music, Spotify, Audible, and any podcatcher that you can think of. So if we are not somewhere that you expect us to be, let us know. And Dennis is always really great about getting us in those places. And you can email us that information if you'd like, or if there's any kind of messages that don't simply fit into a good social media post, then you can always email us at podcaststardust@gmail.com. And while you're at it, you can also hit up our link in our show notes. That'll take you to our TeePublic store, and you can pick from one of 7 different show logo designs and put that on a t-shirt, a sweatshirt. You can even get some socks, a ball cap, some workout shorts. So you go to the gym and get all swole like Rada. Then people will say, "Hey, where did you get those shorts?" TeePublic. There you go.
Okay. All right. I was not expecting that. I want to remind everybody where you can be found with your sky. I'm sorry, where you can be found with your cosplay.
Absolutely. So you can find me at j.simpscosplay on my Instagram, and that's where you can see me as all of my fun characters from Ahsoka and Hera and the Fourth Sister and my original concept Mandalorian and more. And just want to let everybody know I had mentioned last week that I was on reading between the reels for Craig Dickinson. I did a great little fun question and answer session with his students, and he has since put that episode out. So if you check that out, please let me know what you think. So it's part of his Star Wars 101 series, and I got to be the first installment in that. So thanks again, Craig. It was so much fun to talk to your students. So again, that's reading between the reels.
And you did a great job. I had fun listening to that.
Thank you.
Okay, upcoming on the show on Monday, we are finishing off season 3 of the Clone Wars as part of our Clone Wars rewatch. So make sure you check that out. And it's a fun Ahsoka and Chewbacca conversation. And then on Wednesday, we are revisiting The Mandalorian and Grogu 1 month after its release. So we got a good guest for that. You all know who he is. Make sure you come back and check that one out as well. So thanks for listening to episode 1047 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great weekend. Happy Father's Day one more time. And until next time, may the Force be with you.
And go get those shorts.